911 Good Samaritans. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation. I'm David Shuster. Imagine that you're at a party with some friends, family, and somebody suddenly has a drug or alcohol overdose. What do? Well, most of us would naturally be inclined to call 911, get a ambulance there as quickly as possible. There's actually a law on the books in most states that if you do this, you can actually not be prosecuted or punished for being at a party or being around drugs. There's a law in New York now that has been around for 10 years, and there's an effort to extend it so that now this is something that is required to be taught in high school, so that all high school students are aware of this. And joining us to talk about this effort is Lucas Wentworth. He's a cannabis industry publicist. He's also a harm reduction advocate. Lucas, good of you to join us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, David.
So Lucas, you had your own experience when you were 17. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so around the time I was 17 years old, I was at this small gathering at some of my friends' house while their parents were away. And we were doing, just the usual things that youth do at these types of parties. But at one point, somebody came running over to where I was, and they told me that a girl had snorted something. It was unclear what she had snorted during all the chaos. But by the time we went over there, and we tried to shake her, and we were yelling for her to wake up, it was pretty obvious that she was overdosing on something. And so everybody around me started freaking out naturally. People were trying to decide what the best course of action would be. Some people proposed we drop her off outside of an emergency room. There were other people that were just talking about leaving the party. But I have the fortune of having a mother who is a social worker, and she had taught my brother and I about the Good Samaritan law, which passed in 2011, which essentially serves as a legal shield, as you were saying, for people to call 911 without fear of arrest if they or someone they're with is having a drug or alcohol overdose. And so because I was knowledgeable of this law and our rights as minors around it, I was able to assure everybody around me at the party that we would not be getting in trouble if we called 911. And in fact, that was the right thing to do. And it was a good thing that we did, because when the EMTs arrived, they gave her some Narcan or naloxone, which is an opioid reversing drug. And they told us that she wasn't breathing when they arrived. And she came to in the back of the ambulance, and they drove her to the hospital. But really, if we had done anything, if we had tried to drive her to the hospital or anything less than what we did do, she probably would have died.
And it sounds like the biggest challenge now is really to try to convince or try to, public awareness to let more people know that this law exists.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm so happy to be on your show and to be talking about some of the stuff that I'm trying to work on.
Now, what's been the reaction as you've gone to New York lawmakers to say, hey, it's great that this law exists, but let's actually make sure that high school students, as part of their curriculum, are taught about it?
Yeah, so this is really kind of a citizen lobbying effort. I've been working on it with my boss at my public relations firm, Evan Nissen, who was actually an original lobbyist that was helping push through the original Good Samaritan law. And so he's been a really helpful force in guiding me through this process. This is the first time I've ever tried to push through legislation. And so we reached out to Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal, who represents a district in Manhattan. And her office, we reached out to her because she's produced progressive legislation around drugs in the past. And her office was really into the idea. And basically they got to work immediately writing this bill, which basically mandates that the Good Samaritan law is taught about in public high schools in New York State. It's called A6179 right now, and it was introduced in the Assembly in New York in March of 2021. And so far, what Evan and I are doing right now is we've been reaching out to other Assembly people and encouraging other people in our lives to do so, urging them to co-sponsor the legislation. And yeah, we've already gotten 2 co-sponsors, and we've gotten a number of organizations to write in letters of support to try to help us too. So far things are going pretty well, and we're hoping that it's reintroduced once the assembly session starts again soon.
Has there been any resistance, any major obstacles with Republicans or people who don't want any sort of discussion of drugs or anything else in high school?
So far, not yet. Um, and we're hoping that we don't run into a lot of resistance, considering that the original legislation was passed bipartisanly and almost unanimously. Though, of course, things have changed a bit since 2011 in the political sphere. So nothing yet, but it's definitely something we're keeping in mind.
And Lucas, how popular or how widespread are 911 Good Samaritan laws across the United States? Are there many states that already have this? Are there any other states that already teach this in their schools?
Yeah, that's a good question. So far, we're not aware of anywhere that teaches about it in schools. This would be the first legislation of that kind. But there are Good Samaritan laws on the books in just about every state, though they vary widely in the amount of protection they offer to the caller and the overdose victim.
And just to be clear, in New York, I mean, if somebody is underage and they're involved in alcohol or drugs, it doesn't matter that they're younger than 18. If they call 911, if they're at the scene of what would ordinarily be considered a crime, as long as they're doing the right thing, they are protected. Correct?
Yeah, that's exactly correct, and that's why we think it's so important to teach about it in high schools, because the reality is this just teaching generations of New Yorkers about their associated rights with this law will end up saving lives, especially young lives.
And has the treatment for overdoses gotten better over the last 10 years?
There have been a number of advancements, yeah. And New York State is actually on kind of the progressive end of these types of harm reduction legislations. I know that there's been some others that they've passed this year that like allowed medically assisted treatment in jails and prisons. There are some other things too, but there are a lot of advancements in harm reduction legislation, which gives us encouragement about this one.
Do you find much surprise when you talk to younger people who are not aware of this law, or going back to that party that you were at when you were 17? I mean, it seems like it should be a no-brainer for most kids that, hey, do the right thing, call 911. But I gather that for a lot of kids, they're terrified. They're afraid that they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. In my experience and in talking to other people, young people. My wife is actually an educator. She teaches sex and health education in Buffalo Public Schools, where we're located. And as part of she works for like a nonprofit that is contracted to schools to teach health classes. And as part of her minors' rights curriculum, she started to tell the youth about the Good Samaritan law. And many of them have been coming up to her and thanking her and telling her that they weren't aware of it. So it's really an important thing to teach the youth about it.
And that underscores that even right now, if it's not a requirement to be part of the curriculum, there's nothing, I suppose, in New York or really in any other state that stops a teacher from saying on their own, hey, I just want to make sure you are aware of a law that exists to protect all of you who may be going to a party tonight or tomorrow night or over the weekend and may see something catastrophic.
Yeah, definitely.
Where do you, so you mentioned that you think this is going to be taken up when the assembly gets back in session. I assume that it passes. How quickly would it take effect? Could it go into as early as, say, winter time in the school year? I mean, what's the time frame for all of this?
Yeah, hopefully it would be implemented as soon as possible. Probably it would take a little bit of work to get it into the current curriculum. So I would imagine it would probably take about a school year to be implemented.
And the current trajectory of drug overdoses, are we seeing more overdoses now than, say, 5 years ago? Less, about the same? Where are we?
Yeah, actually, just last week, the CDC released its latest numbers about overdoses during 2020, and it was incredibly tragic. It's the worst year in recorded history in the United States in terms of drug overdoses. I believe the number was something like 93,000 Americans died of preventable overdoses last year, and over 5,000 of them were in New York alone. So that really underscores the importance of it.
And do you see that as a function of the pandemic and just sort of the general malaise and depression of people in general, or is there something else that's driving this?
I think it was definitely exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think probably a lot of harm reduction advocates would agree with that.
Well, Lucas, it is really a terrific work that you're doing, and good luck in trying to get this extension of the 911 Good Samaritan bill passed so that high school students are required to learn about it. Everybody should know about this, whether you're in high school or college or any age. Call 911 if you see somebody having an overdose. Do it. You're going to be protected, at least in New York and most states as well. Lucas Wentworth, a cannabis industry publicist, also a harm reduction advocate. Lucas, good of you to join us on the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
You got it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.